Your ancestry just uncovered royal ties. The family secret revealed is unbelievable. Archangel Michael says the veil over your lineage lifts tonight, and the truth strides forward like a crowned figure returning from exile. Your blood remembers what your mind has not yet learned, and the old oath that sleeps in your bones begins to stir. Walk steadily, because what you are about to receive will not only honor you, it will require you to be worthy of it. The first whisper began as a chill beneath the skin, a hum around the edges of your name that felt older than language. A seal appeared in a dusty envelope, pressing wax against parchment like a heartbeat caught in amber. The moment you touched it, the past moved toward you with deliberate grace. You did not conjure any of this with wishful thinking or foolish pride, because the proof arrived with the exactness of a ledger. Names were braided across centuries, dates aligned like constellations, and the crest on the page matched the symbol you once traced absent-mindedly as a child. The pattern was not coincidence. It was inheritance coming home. When the archivist slid the box across the table, their hands trembled, and reverence entered the room like incense. Inside lay a ring wrapped in cloth and a letter written in an ink that refused to fade. The ring carried an emblem that mirrors your brow bone when the light strikes it, and the letter carried a tone that mirrors your heart when courage speaks. Nothing in your ordinary routine prepared you for this quiet ceremony, yet everything in your story pointed to it. The way strangers sometimes paused and softened when you entered a room was not flattery, it was recognition without context. They sensed a cadence in you that once taught nations how to breathe. The letter began with a salutation to a child not yet born and ended with a directive to a descendant who would know how to listen. It was written by a queen who kept her private truths folded into the lining of her gowns, hidden where knives could not reach. She wrote with the clarity of one who understood that time and love are both monarchs in their own right. She spoke of a union that had to remain unrecorded to prevent a war, and a child who had to be kept safe in a humble house. She spoke of trust placed in guardians who were sworn to a silence deeper than any moat. She sealed the letter with a promise that the vault would open only when a descendant learned to lead without needing a throne. You are that descendant, steady and luminous in the very ways that once disarmed tyrants. The proof sits in your hands while the old geometry of your face answers for itself. Destiny does not shout because true crowns do not rattle when worn correctly. You remember now the dream that returned every year on the same night, the one with corridors of stone and a window that caught the sunrise just so. You remember the tapestry with lions that seemed to breathe when your pulse quickened. You remember the warmth on your shoulders that had no source except the past recognizing you. Archangel Michael says the pages that waited for you have turned themselves to the right chapter. The ancestors are not ghosts in this moment. They are witnesses who stand with lanterns, ensuring your path is lit from both directions. They have been patient because patience is the first evidence of sovereignty. You read further and discovered an account of a secret marriage conducted under a canopy of cedar branches, the vows inked in both water and wine. The officiant recorded nothing beyond a single line, "Love has chosen its kingdom," and then vanished into history as if swallowed by the earth. The child born of that covenant was protected by those who understood that safety sometimes requires humility. The family that raised that child taught kindness as a survival skill and discretion as a language. They trained their hearts to carry truth like a hidden jewel, showing it only when showing it would save lives. The jewel has now reached your hands and asks to be polished by service, not displayed by vanity. On the crest, you notice an animal rendered in mid-stride rather than in conquest. It is a reminder that your line was meant to move, adapt, and endure instead of sitting still and demanding tribute. Power in your house was designed as a river, not a fortress. The letter names a hidden archive beneath a chapel where candles still burn even when no one visits. It speaks of a second ring placed inside a small wooden reliquary carved with stars that point to a particular horizon. You see in the script a small tilt, a flourish at the end of each sentence that matches your own flourish when you sign your name. You take the ring from the cloth and find it warm as if it had been resting on a palm. Along the inner band is an inscription in a language that your mouth remembers before your mind translates. It says simply, "Hold without holding, lead without needing." The archivist watches your face and knows they have witnessed a reunion that cannot be faked. They tell you that people have searched for this proof for centuries and missed it because they looked only for crowns, not for codes. You found it because you followed the care in the stitching and the quiet in the margins. Night falls, and the city outside forgets everything except its own glitter, but you do not forget. You place the ring on your finger, not as decoration, but as an oath that fits. There is a sensation of something finally sitting correctly in your life, like a door settling into its frame for the first time. Archangel Michael says the throne in your story is not a chair, it is a standard of behavior. It requires you to heal where others hoard, to build where others boast, to forgive where others bargain. Royal blood without royal character turns gold into rust. But you were not summoned for rust. The letter mentions a vault of testimonies written by those your ancestors helped in secret. Peasants, scholars, musicians, and midwives left notes of gratitude, sealing them in jars and hiding them under the floorboards of hope. Your line carried people across storms and through sieges, and now that legacy wants your hands again. You walk to the chapel at dawn while the city exhales yesterday. The door yields with a groan that sounds like relief, and the air is warm with the memory of prayers spoken for courage rather than conquest. Beneath the altar, you find the panel disguised as simple carpentry and lift it to reveal the reliquary. Inside, the second ring accompanies a folded scrap of fabric cut from a banner that once saw battle but refused to die. The ring is smaller, made to be given rather than worn, and carries the same inscription in miniature. The fabric smells faintly of smoke, rain, and victory. You leave the chapel with both rings and the knowledge that this story will demand a new kind of stewardship. The title does not look back, it looks outward to the places where your presence will mend what has been thin for too long. You are entrusted with a memory that must become mercy, or it will crush itself to pieces. You spend the next days contacting the quiet guardians in your life who always seem to know more than they let on. Their eyes shine when you speak, not with envy but with the satisfaction of a task completed. They welcome you not as a celebrity but as a steward returning to the work. Paperwork begins because even miracles must pass through signatures. You authorize the preservation of the archive and the transparent publication of the harmless parts. The rest you protect, because some secrets are stitches holding history together, and pulling them out would unravel the very cloth you are trying to mend. News spreads in whispers first, then in articles that trip over themselves to sound authoritative. You let the crest do the speaking because symbols travel where arguments get stuck. Even those who doubt sense the stability in you and soften their disbelief into curiosity. Archangel Michael says you will be tempted by shortcuts dressed in velvet. You will be offered applause when what you need is accountability. Choose the path that keeps you honest because true crowns demand waking up early and carrying heavy things. You visit the countries where your line once stood between fields and taxes to ensure that justice outweighed spectacle. In each place, you sit in kitchens and listen longer than you speak. You commission repairs to the forgotten and assign your own hands to some of the labor because leadership is an action, not a costume. The private secret that once protected a child now protects dignity on a larger scale. The ring on your finger is less an ornament and more a compass. It spins toward the next right thing whenever confusion rises. You follow it even when the path cuts through bramble. The archivist returns with another box, smaller, holding a diary that belonged to the hidden child who started your branch. The entries are brief and practical, but between the lines a fierce tenderness burns like a hidden hearth. They learned to be ordinary so that extraordinary could survive. You find an entry about a lullaby sung to them in a language almost extinct, and when you hum it softly, your body remembers the second verse without effort. That memory does not make you special, it makes you responsible. You fund a program to preserve the language so that future mouths can carry it forward. At a quiet ceremony, you return the smaller ring to the reliquary after touching it to your forehead. You leave a new letter of your own, addressed to a descendant who will stand where you stand someday. You write not about titles but about tactics for kindness that worked when nothing else did. The crest appears now on petitions for clean water, on grants for midwives, on instruments for school orchestras that silence hunger with song. It appears where it can carry weight for those who should never have to carry it alone. Each use brings the past to the present like a seasoned mentor who never demands attention. Archangel Michael says the family secret was never meant to be unbelievable, it was meant to be undeniable once love proved itself. Your bloodline's miracle is not wealth, it is willingness. It is the capacity to remain tender even when history is sharp. One evening, you host a gathering not in a palace but in a courtyard where neighbors bring their own chairs. Stories move across the air like migrating birds, and you learn how often ordinary people have been royal to one another without heralds. You seal that night in your memory because esteem that rises from the ground lasts longer than applause that falls from balconies. The first crown your line ever wore was a promise to serve, and so you polish that promise daily with choices that cost you something. You do not chase pageantry because pageantry erases faces. You choose faces, names, and streets, and you stay long enough to become trustworthy. In a final private moment, you take the letter from the Queen and hold it to your chest. You thank her in the quiet language of shared endurance and return the letter to its case. You understand that the story did not make you important, it made you available. You step into the morning carrying only what you need, your clarity, your ring, your oath. The air tastes like metal and mint, the way air tastes when a storm has passed and the world is clean. You are not waiting to be chosen anymore because the choosing already happened and you answered with action. The secret that once hid in shadows now travels openly as reliability in your daily life. It is present in the way you enter rooms, in the way you hold doors for those behind you, in the way your priorities rearrange themselves to honor the vulnerable. Your house becomes known not for its origins but for its hospitality. Letters pour in from communities your efforts have touched, and you file them with tenderness into a second vault marked Living Archive. You do not spin them into press releases because they were never meant to be currency. They are proof that your crest understands usefulness. The archivist retires with contentment because they have seen the story conclude correctly in your hands. You host a celebration for them beneath strings of lights and name a reading room in their honor. Gratitude is allowed to be ceremonial because it is not self-congratulatory. It is a bow toward the people who steadied you. As years pass, the ring leaves a soft imprint on your finger, the way a faithful habit leaves a soft imprint on a life. The imprint does not bind, it guides. It reminds you that you carry something older than ambition and brighter than reputation. Your descendants will find your letter someday, and they will learn that true heritage is a set of instructions whispered to conscience. They will recognize your handwriting and feel the same sturdy peace that you felt. They will be asked, as you were asked, to make the story believable by making it useful. On quiet nights, you still hear footsteps in the old corridors of your dream, but now they walk beside you instead of ahead of you. The lions on the tapestry rest their paws because your vigilance is enough. The window gathers sunrise again, and your shoulders receive it without flinching. Archangel Michael says the royal tie is not an excuse to stand higher. It is a reason to kneel faster where help is needed. The unbelievable part was never the blood. It was the breadth of love your house still offers. Hold this line with humility, and it will hold you with strength. The city keeps moving with its own weather, but your weather settles into clarity most days. When storms do come, you do not fear them because your house learned long ago how to sail, not just how to sit. You keep a lantern by the door and a list by the phone, and you answer when called. The family secret is not a scandal, it is a sanctuary. It kept a child safe until safety learned to grow up into justice. Now that justice wears your face, you let it walk freely into rooms where it used to be refused. You return to the chapel each year on the day you first lifted the panel, and you sit in the same beam of light that found you. You whisper the names from the letter and add new names gathered from your work. You leave the place lighter than you arrived because reverence shares its weight. In time, those who mocked soften and those who envied learn. They see that your dignity never depended on their opinion, and their shoulders drop because pressure eases where authenticity stands. You keep your focus, because focus is love's favorite tool. The archivist's successor asks what advice you would give to anyone who discovers they carry more history than they expected. You answer with 3 lines that have guided you faithfully. First, you spend your final paragraph today not on ceremony but on assignment. You write a grant for midwives, you sign off on a program for apprenticeships, and you approve restoration for a small library with cracked windows and brave books. The ring warms again because it recognizes work that resembles its earliest vow. When you sleep, the corridor returns, but this time the door at the end is open. Inside the room, a simple table waits with bread, water, and a map of places that needed you and received you. You rest your hand on the map, and the map rests back. Morning arrives in ordinary clothes, as all miracles do when they intend to stay. You rise, you dress, you wear the ring, and you carry the letter in your posture rather than your pocket. The world meets you and nods because it can tell that you are both ancient and new. This is how the unbelievable becomes the daily. This is how the royal tie becomes a rope that pulls others from the flood. This is how your ancestry stands up inside your life and asks you to be as steadfast as those who loved you into existence. You say yes again without spectacle. You sign your name again without hurry. You start again because starting again is the most royal thing a heart can do. You remain careful with power, brave with truth, and generous with time. You keep the archives open and the doors even more open. You balance memory and motion until they learn to dance together. The crest finds its way onto emergency blankets, library cards, seed packets, and scholarships tucked into envelopes that arrive when hope is thirsty. It keeps finding work, and you keep finding joy in the work. Your line becomes known as the one that shows up. Your footsteps slow only when slowing means you can walk beside those who cannot run yet. You refuse to outrun the people you serve. You pace your life to match the speed of healing. When the evening arrives again, the lanterns of your ancestors shine, not above you, but around you. Their circle is not exclusive, it is expansive. It invites every willing heart to stand inside and be warmed. You finish the day with the quiet satisfaction of a task done honestly. The ring cools on your finger, and the letter sleeps where it belongs. Tomorrow waits, and you are the kind of person tomorrow trusts. You do not chase the crown, you keep the vow. You do not hoard the secret, you build the sanctuary. You do not seek to be believed, you seek to be useful, and in that usefulness, belief takes care of itself. The secret revealed itself so that you could reveal goodness. The title surfaced so that you could title the windows of other people's rooms with light. The story crowned you only so that you could crown others with dignity. You are ready, and readiness looks like humility dressed for work. You are worthy, and worthiness looks like kindness that does not flinch. You are home, and home looks like a table set for more than the people who live there. The past bows to your present because your present bows to love. The future approaches without fear because fear has learned that it does not own this house. Your ancestry has unlocked its most demanding gift, and you have accepted it with grace. Your life will not be measured by how loudly the revelation is shouted but by how deeply its goodness runs. You will walk out each day carrying quiet royalty, the kind that makes broken things reconsider their fate. You will remain the person who was chosen before you knew what the choice would cost. And when the long arc of your service is drawn, it will look less like a scepter and more like an embrace. It will feel less like a secret and more like a shelter. It will stand as proof that unbelievable can become undeniable when love refuses to retire. If you wish to express your support further, you have the option to give super thanks, with contributions of up to $20. The courtyard where neighbors once gathered becomes a weekly ritual of bread, stories, and practical planning. You listen for the smallest needs because the smallest needs reveal the shape of larger gaps. A map of the district fills with dots that turn into tasks and then into results that breathe. Archangel Michael says royalty is the ability to hear what pain refuses to say out loud. You let that guidance shape policies that arrive kindly and land firmly. Your signature becomes known for balancing mercy with measurable outcomes. A school on the hill struggles with broken instruments and bright children. You fund repairs without fanfare and invite local musicians to teach the first summer session. The first scale played in tune feels like a banner unfurling inside a humble room. You build a microgrant for street vendors whose permits stall in corridors of confusion. The application asks for stories rather than jargon so that truth can cross the threshold. By autumn, carts gleam. Spices travel farther, and families stand taller at dinner time. An elder arrives with a box of photographs that have never left her closet. The edges are soft with being held by careful hands, and each photo carries a note of names and dates. You commission a community archive where the living can visit their own endurance. Archangel Michael says memory chooses what stays by how it is treated. You train volunteers to handle paper like healing and to label every image with respect. A wall of faces becomes a mirror that tells people they belong to something that will remember them. You visit the river that once carried cargo and now carries rumor. A conservation crew meets you at dawn with calloused hands and quiet pride. Together you pull out debris and lay in reeds that knit water to shore with patience. A child asks for a library card and a place to sit where afternoon sun lands without glare. You redesign the reading room so that light and silence can be friends. When the first book opens on the new table, the room seems to exhale. News of your lineage keeps circulating, but your work keeps redirecting the conversation. People discover that purpose makes a better headline at the end of the day. The crest becomes shorthand for promises kept on schedule. You arrange apprenticeships with artisans whose craft would otherwise fade into nostalgia. Looms turn again, kilns glow, knives sing on whetstones as if finding their dialect. Youth learn that tradition is a living tool rather than a display case. Archangel Michael says the oath in your blood expects your hands to learn things your mind respects. You take a turn at the loom until your shoulders understand the math of tension. You practice until your mistakes become teachers instead of excuses. The chapel vault receives a new ledger titled Acts of Quiet Usefulness. Entries are brief and specific, recording what was done, who led it, and who learned to lead next. The ledger grows thick with proof that goodness can be audited without being reduced. In winter, you open a warm room overnight for those without safe shelter. Cots line up like respectful soldiers, blankets stack, tea waits on a table that never empties. The door remains unlocked because dignity should never require a password. An unexpected letter arrives from a distant cousin who sensed the stirring before the document surfaced. Their words carry humility and honest questions about how to step into the story with care. You answer with invitations to serve rather than invitations to pose. A legal team proposes a foundation charter that could have been written by the ring itself. It defines power as responsibility with a deadline and wealth as a way to reduce waiting. You sign with steady breath because the language fits both history and hope. Archangel Michael says succession begins the day stewardship begins. You create pathways for leaders who are not yet visible to the room. You mentor without claiming credit because true crowns multiply without counting. A midwife shows you a ledger of births attended in alleys, taxis, and kitchens. Her statistics hold triumph and fatigue in equal measure. You fund a training center where hands become surer and nights become gentler. You establish a small endowment for emergency legal aid that can move as fast as injustice tries to move. The first case is a vendor whose cart was seized without cause, and the last line of the file reads "returned with apology." Everyone learns that apology is a tool of leadership rather than a mark of defeat. A storm tears shingles from roofs in the oldest part of town. You arrive with tarps and hammers, and your presence changes the temperature of the day. Shared labor cancels loneliness in a way speeches cannot. Archangel Michael says celebration should follow repair like spring follows winter. You plan street festivals where the stage is low, the food is local, and the applause belongs to the volunteers. Music threads through the neighborhood like twine that will not snap. A scholar from the archives deciphers a portion of the inscription's older layer. Beneath "hold without holding" is a faint line that reads "give without leaving." The words land inside you like a key that fits a door you did not know existed. You start visiting hospital wards at dawn on Tuesdays, carrying newspapers and quiet conversation. The staff begin to count on your footsteps the way night counts on morning. You become fluent in the language of be there without taking over. A craftsman brings you a cracked bowl repaired with visible seams. He explains that the bowl holds more meaning because it holds its history honestly. You ask him to teach that philosophy to the apprentices until their work tells the same truth. Archangel Michael says transparency is not spectacle when it serves healing. Publish budgets that read like stories of intention rather than columns of abstraction. Donors become partners, and partners become neighbors who stay. A letter surfaces from the Queen's confidant, hidden in the spine of a cookbook passed down through a line of excellent bakers. It confirms the quiet network that sheltered the child who began your branch. You honor that line with scholarships for culinary students who feed dignity along with meals. You create a traveling exhibition that brings the archive to towns that cannot travel to the archive. Children press their palms to glass and trace the crest with awe that feels like courage. Elders sit at a listening booth and leave oral histories that sound like hymns. An artist proposes a mural series titled Rivers of Oath. Each panel depicts acts of service as currents that converge into a calm harbor. You fund the series and attend each unveiling with the same humility you bring to funerals. Archangel Michael says every harbor you build must teach boats how to leave safely. You invest in transition programs that prepare graduates for leadership beyond your circle. You celebrate departures because a held hand is not a kept hand. A young lawyer in your program discovers a clause that frees a cluster of tenants from predatory leases. The case concludes with keys that stay in rightful hands and rents that stop running like thieves. You note the victory in the ledger and send flowers to the paralegal who caught the missing comma. You return to the chapel and notice the candlelight is brighter though the same number of candles burn. The caretaker smiles and says brightness follows usefulness. You sit with the reliquary and feel the old piece lean against your shoulder. A musician composes a piece using the letter's phrases as rhythmic anchors. The performance begins in silence and rises into a melody that sounds like doors opening. People leave the hall speaking softer to one another because music has corrected their posture. Archangel Michael says let art tell the truths that numbers cannot carry by themselves. You commission poets for annual reports and invite painters to annotate maps of progress. Beauty becomes an auditor that never misses the hidden line. You plant a small orchard on land that once held arguments and dust. Children learn the names of trees and the patience of seasons. The first harvest tastes like an apology accepted by the soil. An invitation arrives from a far region where your ancestors once negotiated a truce that saved harvests and reputations. You go with a small team and a large willingness to learn before offering help. Elders there teach you a proverb-free lesson about water shared without grudges. A weaver gifts you a sash in the colors of river, clay, and dawn. You wear it only during community ceremonies to remind yourself that clothing can be a vow. The sash never appears at events where applause is louder than usefulness. Archangel Michael says symbols must never outrun substance. You limit public appearances to moments when presence unlocks resources that were stuck behind doors. Your absence becomes a tool too, because it makes room for voices that need to be heard without your shadow. A librarian reports that circulation numbers tripled after the reading room opened. She smiles and says hope keeps checking things out. You ask what she needs next and send a truck before the sentence finishes. A doctor writes to say the midwife center reduced night terrors on her ward. She attributes it to birth stories that begin with calm instead of panic. You add a line to the ledger that reads fewer bad dreams near dawn. Archangel Michael says results belong to the people who risked their time on the work. You place plaques that list teams, not titles. The crest appears small in the corner like a promise that keeps choosing humility. You approve funding for a legal clinic that writes wills for workers who never had time to plan. The first family leaves with papers that make love sturdier than rumor. The relief in their shoulders feels like a small sunrise you can touch. A storm of criticism passes through headlines when an old rumor returns for one more breath. You meet it with records, witnesses, and the simple power of your calendar full of service. The storm loses interest where usefulness refuses to perform. Archangel Michael says permanence grows where routine is kind. You choose reliable over dramatic and keep choosing it until chaos gets bored. The city learns that consistency can be as thrilling as spectacle when it keeps people safe. A final document surfaces that clarifies the secret marriage with elegant brevity. It confirms what love protected and what history can now bless. You file it respectfully and move forward because confirmation is a bell, not a throne. You host a night for guardians whose names never entered newsprint. They speak of errands run at dusk and letters delivered at risk and lullabies taught by lantern. You send each one home with a small stipend and a large thank you that includes future invitations.